I spent years believing that my love and my bank account could keep my family afloat. Every Friday evening, with a heavy heart and trembling fingers, I wired a portion of my hard-earned money to the Marshalls, convinced that my sacrifice was the glue holding our fractured lives together. But deep down, I always sensed something was off. There was an unspoken truth that no sum of dollars could erase. I was nothing more than a convenient benefactor in their narrative of need. It all began when Dad lost his job, or so they claimed. One humid summer evening, as thunder rolled in the distance, Mom's voice cracked over the phone. "Avery, we're drowning. The bills are piling up, and we don't know how much longer we can keep the lights on." I didn't hesitate. I believed that by sending another $1,000, I was preserving the only family I had left. I reassured myself that I was doing the right thing. Family is supposed to support one another, right? But as the weeks turned into months, the cycle became a relentless tide. Every call, every urgent text from Mom. "Please, honey, we need a little extra for medicine." Or, "Can you help us cover the rent this month?" pushed me deeper into a chasm of financial sacrifice. Meanwhile, my older sister Sierra, the golden child, lived a life free of worry. She never lifted a finger to earn a penny. Instead, she basked in the unearned glow of our parents' endless praise. "Sierra is our pride," they'd say, as if her existence magically solved every problem. While I stood alone with my savings evaporating like mist. One chilly autumn morning, while nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee in my cramped apartment, a notification pinged on my phone. It was an Instagram post. A snapshot of a dazzling yacht party, unmistakably featuring Mom, Dad, and Sierra. Their laughter, champagne flutes raised high against a backdrop of crystalline blue water, was a jarring contradiction to the dire pleas I had been fielding weeks earlier. My heart pounded as I scrolled through picture after picture. My parents seemingly reveling in luxury, their smiles wide and insincere. The same hands that had begged for my money were now clutching designer accessories, their world far removed from the hardships they had once described. Anger, sharp and unbidden, coiled within me. I realized that every dollar I had sent had been siphoned off to fund their indulgence. I recalled the countless nights spent skipping small pleasures. No extra latte, no new shoes. Just the relentless drain of supporting a lifestyle that wasn't mine. I decided then that I would no longer be their ATM. That evening, I made my way to their suburban home, the one I had grown up in, now strangely alien in its silence. I arrived under a twilight sky, the air thick with the scent of impending rain. I knocked. The door swung open, revealing Mom with a forced smile, her eyes darting nervously. "Avery, what a surprise," she said, her tone brittle. "Surprise?" I echoed, stepping inside and surveying the immaculate living room. Too pristine, almost theatrical. "Why is it that I never hear from you unless you're short on cash?" Before she could answer, Dad emerged from the kitchen, his face drawn and pale. "We're a family, Avery," he began, but I cut him off. "No, you're not. I've been funding your lives, watching you spend money on vacations, parties, and then you act shocked when I call it out," I said, my voice trembling with restrained fury. The conversation escalated quickly. Sierra, who had been lounging on the sofa as if she were on a permanent holiday, interjected with a sneer. "Maybe if you weren't so stingy, we wouldn't be in this mess." Her tone dripped with entitlement as she waved a perfectly manicured hand dismissively. I clenched my fists. "Stingy? I've sacrificed everything to keep this family afloat, while you live like royalty on Daddy's dime. I'm tired of being invisible, of being treated as nothing more than a cash machine." Mom's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost believed her contrite. But then Dad added, his voice low and cold, "We don't owe you an explanation for every dollar you send. You know the value of family." That night, in the cold glow of a single lamp, I returned to my apartment with my decision made. I opened my banking app and, with one decisive tap, canceled every recurring transfer to the Marshalls. The act was both liberating and excruciating, like severing a lifeline I had clung to for years. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Phone calls, texts, and desperate pleas flooded my lines. "Avery, please," Mom sobbed. "We need you now more than ever." But I remained resolute. I wasn't prepared to be manipulated any longer. I had given too much of myself for a family that would never appreciate me. Over the following days, the tension escalated. I learned from Mr. Jenkins, our longtime neighbor, that the Marshalls had been on an extravagant trip to a coastal resort. a trick they had hidden from me, all while my accounts were bleeding money. Mr. Jenkins recounted how he'd seen them laughing, dressed in designer clothes as they strolled along a sunlit boardwalk, a stark contrast to the desperate tone of their nightly calls. The betrayal ignited a fire inside me. On the following Thanksgiving, a holiday once filled with forced smiles and hollow cheer, I arrived unannounced. The house was exactly as I remembered, too clean, too staged, as if every surface had been scrubbed to hide secrets. The dinner table was set for a feast I no longer cared to share. I sat in a dark corner, listening to Sierra brag about her latest shopping spree and the extravagant trip that had recently concluded, all while my parents avoided my gaze. Unable to contain my anger any longer, I stood up and addressed them directly. "You lied to me. You used me. I gave everything I had to keep you afloat, and all I received in return was deceit." My voice, usually soft and apologetic, now rang out clear and uncompromising. The room fell silent. For a moment, it seemed the entire house held its breath. Then, as if triggered by my words, a chaotic argument erupted. Sierra's laughter turned bitter as she spat back, "You're just bitter because you don't fit in here. Family is forever, and you'll always be the poor, ungrateful one." I took a deep breath and replied, "No. Family is supposed to love, not exploit. I'm done being your lifeline." With that, I stormed out, leaving behind a chorus of angry shouts and pleading cries. In the ensuing weeks, the fallout rippled to every aspect of my life. The marshals tried to mend fences, sending impassioned emails and desperate voice messages, but my resolve remained unshaken. I had taken back control, and the freedom felt intoxicating yet bittersweet. I was finally free from their manipulation, free to rebuild my identity on my own terms. As time passed, the harshness of that confrontation began to melt into a cold, reflective clarity. I found solace in building a new life, one where my worth wasn't measured by how much I could give, but by what I could achieve on my own. I invested in myself, enrolling in night classes, honing my craft, and even starting a small business that allowed me to channel my long-held anger into creative energy. A year later, I received an unexpected invitation. It was from my father, a terse message asking if I'd come home for a family dinner, this time, a tentative olive branch extended in words and silence. I hesitated, memories of that fateful Thanksgiving swirling in my mind like autumn leaves in a bitter wind. After much deliberation, I decided to visit, not out of obligation, but to see if maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to mend what had been broken. Walking through the familiar front door was like stepping into a time capsule. The house was quieter, more subdued, a stark contrast to the chaos of our last encounter. My father greeted me with a hesitant smile, and Mom's eyes were rimmed with remorse. Sierra, however, remained distant, her expression hard as stone. The dinner was subdued, every word was measured, every silence heavy with unspoken regrets. During dessert, Dad finally spoke, his voice soft and tentative. "Avery, I know we hurt you. We lost sight of what mattered, our family. I can't undo the past, but I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us someday." His words struck me like a fragile promise, one that might shatter at any moment. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to see them not as leeches but as flawed humans, victims of their own insecurities. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing their behavior, it was about freeing myself from the burden of endless resentment. I left that night with a conflicted heart. Part of me still burned with indignation, while another part longed for the warmth of belonging. In the weeks that followed, my phone remained silent. Sierra's messages, once laced with contempt, slowly faded into sporadic check-ins. The marshals began to rebuild a semblance of trust, this time without the crutch of my financial support. 3 years later, as I sat on the balcony of my modest apartment, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. I had been used, manipulated, and discarded, yet I had emerged stronger, a testament to the power of self-worth and the courage to say enough. One crisp evening, an unexpected call came through. It was Sierra. Her voice, hesitant and subdued, carried a tentative olive branch. "Avery, I miss you. Can we talk?" The simple words stirred something within me, a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, our family could learn to redefine what it meant to care. I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe downtown. As we sat across from each other, the years of hurt and silence seemed to dissolve into the clatter of coffee cups and murmured conversations. Sierra's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she confessed, "I always envied your strength, but I never realized how much you carried until it was too late." In that fragile moment, I saw not the manipulative sibling of my past, but a wounded soul desperate to mend what was broken. I didn't know if we would ever fully repair the bond that had been shattered, but for the first time, I dared to believe in the possibility of healing. My story isn't one of triumph over adversity by rejecting family, it's a testament to the painful truth that sometimes love must be redefined, and forgiveness earned through genuine change. I learned that self-respect isn't measured by the dollars you send or the sacrifices you make, it's measured by the courage to stand up, even when it means breaking the cycle of exploitation. As I hung up the phone after that long, emotional conversation with Sierra, I realized that my journey had only just begun. I had reclaimed my life, piece by piece, and while the scars remain, they served as a reminder that I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, capable of forging my own path, and maybe, just maybe, a future where family meant respect, understanding, and unconditional support. And so I sit here tonight, not with regrets, but with a quiet pride in the life I've built, one where I finally understand that sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones fought within the confines of your own home. And though the past still whispers in the dark, I am finally free to listen to my own heart. The winter that followed felt like a long, relentless purge. Each icy gust against my window echoed the bitter memories I'd spent years suppressing. I'd come to see the frost etching delicate patterns on the glass as nature's own way of reminding me that even the harshest cold could be transformed into art. In the depths of those frigid mornings, as I watched my breath form transient clouds in the air, I also witnessed the slow thawing of a heart once hardened by betrayal. Months melted into a bittersweet spring. The heavy, somber skies gave way to a riot of colors, vivid blooms and tender greens replacing the barren winter. I found myself wandering through sun-dappled parks, each step accompanied by the gentle rustle of new leaves. There, the scent of rain-soaked earth mingled with the promise of renewal, and I allowed myself to savor a long-forgotten hope. Every soft drizzle on my skin became a cathartic release, washing away remnants of anger and regret, one tear at a time. In those transformative days, I reached out to Sierra again. Our meeting took place on a bright afternoon under a quilt of scattered clouds, a canvas as unpredictable as our past. Sitting on a weather bench in a quiet garden, we spoke in long, measured sentences that carried both the weight of years lost and the fragile promise of mending. Her eyes, once guarded by pride, now shimmered with unshed tears of remorse. We traded stories of childhood, of sacrifice, and the insidious way money had once defined our worth. The conversation was punctuated by silence, a silence as profound as the distant rumble of an approaching storm, each pause a space for our true emotions to surface. Returning home that evening, I felt an inner calm settle over me, as if the gentle whisper of the spring wind had carried away a piece of my burden. I sat by my window, the fading light of dusk mingling with the soft hum of distant traffic, and reflected on how the tumultuous past had finally begun to recede. I recalled that fateful Thanksgiving, a day marred by deceit and exploitation, and yet, in its aftermath, a glimmer of liberation had emerged. I was no longer defined by the endless flow of money or the unyielding demands of a broken family. It was my heart that had learned to beat on its own. Summer arrived with an exuberance that breathed new life into every corner of the city. Warm, golden afternoons and balmy evenings invited spontaneous adventures. I took to long drives along meandering country roads, where the scent of wildflowers and freshly cut grass intertwined with the sound of my favorite songs. The sun, dipping low in the sky, painted everything in hues of amber and rose, and I let the warmth seep into my soul. Each day was a testament to the resilience I'd forged through years of quiet suffering, a reminder that even the most painful storms eventually give way to brilliant, unfiltered light. One particularly luminous day, while sipping iced tea on a shaded porch, I received a message from my father. His words trembled on the screen, laden with a tentative mix of longing and regret. "Avery, I miss you. We've been trying to make things right. Can you come home for dinner?" The crisp summer air carried a hint of uncertainty, as if nature itself paused to consider the weight of his plea. My pulse quickened, a cocktail of apprehension and cautious optimism surging through me. I replied with measured hope, promising to return if only to see if the fissures in our past might be bridged by time and sincere remorse. The day of the dinner arrived under an overcast sky, the kind that hints at rain but holds its promise in suspense. I stepped onto the familiar threshold of the old family home, now quieter and more vulnerable than I remembered. Inside, the house exuded a raw honesty. The dinner table was set simply, every item arranged with care, but lacking the forced opulence of days gone by. Over a modest meal, my father's soft-spoken apology and my mother's tearful admissions echoed in the stillness of the room. Sierra sat in the corner, her gaze subdued, as if the brightness of her previous arrogance had finally dimmed to reveal genuine remorse. Later that night, after the meal, I stepped outside into the cool, gentle rain. Each drop tapped softly on the pavement, mingling with the quiet whispers of the night. The air was crisp, imbued with the scent of wet earth and the promise of rebirth. Standing there, under a shared umbrella of tentative reconciliation, I realized that forgiveness was not a single, grand gesture but a slow, delicate unfolding, a process as natural and inevitable as the cycle of seasons. In that reflective solitude, I allowed myself to truly feel the aching relief of shedding old burdens, the tender hope that even the most broken bonds could heal, and the bittersweet sorrow of the past that had taught me the cost of unconditional sacrifice. The stormy echoes of my childhood and the bitter chill of betrayal were gradually replaced by the warm glow of self-respect and the soft murmur of newfound strength. As I walked back to my modest apartment, the rain had eased into a gentle drizzle, like nature's lullaby soothing my restless spirit. I realized that my journey was far from over. It was evolving, shifting into a new phase defined not by past wounds but by the quiet power of reclaiming one's own identity. I had learned that true freedom lay in accepting the scars of my history while daring to dream of a future unburdened by old betrayals. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the soft pitter-patter of the remaining raindrops, I felt a profound peace, a delicate equilibrium between sorrow and joy, loss and hope. The darkness outside was no longer oppressive but instead a vast canvas on which countless possibilities could be painted. In that fragile moment, I understood that every tear shed, every act of defiance, and every step toward forgiveness was a note in the symphony of my life, a symphony that now played with the rich, complex tones of resilience, renewal, and ultimately, the triumph of the human spirit. And so, with the rain as my companion and the night sky as my witness, I embraced the future with a quiet determination, knowing that while the past would always be a part of me, it no longer defined the horizon of my dreams.